Good evening and welcome to Murder by the Mic, a series of conversations co-hosted by Novel Suspects, Hachette Audio, and AudioFile magazine, where I have the pleasure to serve as publisher. I have long been involved in audio publishing, and I'm also the executive director of the Audio Publishers Association, so happy June is Audiobook Month to all of you. I'm looking forward to a robust conversation, and we are going to leave time for your questions. So be sure to pop those into the question box. You can ask them of Michael, of Walter, and we will get to them at the end. So let's kick off by introducing our guests. And this is where I prove I am not an audiobook narrator when I try to read someone else's bio. But first up is Walter Mosley. He's the award-winning writer of over 60 books. Wow. And they've been published in 25 languages. So 34 years ago, your Devil in a Blue Dress was published. And since then, the Easy Rollins series, which is really what we're going to focus on tonight, and Walter's other works have received Edgars, the Golden Dagger, the National Book Foundation's Distinguished Contribution to American Letters Award, several NAACP awards, and a Grammy. And in addition, you were named a Mystery Writer of America's Grandmaster. And we've also seen your books adapted for film, for television, and you have been the writer and executive producer of John Singleton's FX show Snowfall. And filming has just completed on Man in My Basement, which is starring Willem Dafoe and Corey Hawkins. Amazing. Next up, we have Michael Boatman, who has given voice to Walter's, by now, completely iconic character, Easy Rollins, since the series was introduced, 16 books ago. And Michael's voice is, of course, a familiar one for many of us audiobook listeners. His recordings have been on AudioFile's best of list for years. And, of course, he's perhaps best known for his 6-year run on the hit comedy series Spin City. You also received NAACP Image Awards for that. And I think if anyone's been watching television recently, you've been playing the conservative lawyer, Julius Cain, on both The Good Wife and The Good Fight, which I have to say I completely enjoyed. And I love the fact that you trace your career in acting to your love of reading. So audiobook narration is an amazing sweet spot for you.
It's true. It's very true. We can talk about it when
Excellent.
we vamp a little bit, but absolutely.
Well,
hello,
welcome
everybody.
To you both.
Thank you. Glad to be
All
here.
Right. I have to ask. Now, I think I'm going to guess the answer, but I have to know. Have you two actually met in person?
Yes. Yes, we have. We've met through Don Cheadle, one of my best friends, good friends with Walter, and which is ironic because Don starred Mouse in Devil in a Blue Dress, and then some years later, I wound up narrating. That was probably the first one that I narrated, I think. I mean, it comes first, obviously, in the series. And at a certain point, I remember thinking, I don't want to do what Don did, because he had such a sort of breakout performance, and, everybody knew who he was. People knew who he was already, but that was obviously what I think have kind of put him on the map. And then over the years, we've met through a couple of times through him at, functions in New York and here. But I'm also a fan of Walter and of all of his books. And I've narrated a few others besides the Easy Rollins books. I think I did one of the Fearless Jones books. I'm pretty sure I've done more than Easy. But Easy's, I don't want to say Easy's easy, but easy because it's not easy, and he's evolving as a character as he grows, and of course as I grow. I think I was in my I don't know, late 30s or something, maybe early 30s when I started these books, and I'm in my now. So it's been a slow but wonderful evolution.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Easy, because when we meet Easy in Devil in a Blue Dress, it's 1948. It's World War II, and the World War II is over, and he's returning as a serviceman looking for a new start, which for him means leaving Houston and going to LA. And there Easy actually finds himself surrounded by other people from Texas, which I love, including Raymond Mouse Alexander, who is a charming sociopath, uh, although he has Easy's back, which Easy is not always happy about. But they're looking for the mysterious Daphne, and they're finding all of this, trouble along the way. But as we come forward, we are about to see the release of the new book, and this is set in the 1970s, and it's Farewell AMETHSTINE, which comes out tomorrow. So I have to say we're very lucky at AudioFile to be able to listen to this early, and I'm here for an event in Los Angeles, so I've been walking around Hollywood listening to you in my ears, Michael, and getting that sense of character in the LA in the 70s, which is fantastic.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
so I would love for you, Walter, to tell us a little bit about, just give a little preview about what's going to happen in this book that comes out tomorrow.
Well, I mean, so what did it say? I mean, Easy has been on his own most of his life, and therefore has trouble. He doesn't have trouble starting relationships or getting into them, but he has troubles keeping them.
Yeah.
And in this book, he meets somebody who, what can I say? I had a friend once who was very upset over a woman that he'd lost. She'd gone. She was gone. And he was upset and he was crying, he was complaining all the time, really for weeks. And one day I turned to him and I said, "Don't worry, Frederick, you will find the wrong woman again." And he laughed so hard that he actually laughed himself out of the depression. Easy has found the wrong woman again. And, he's going to have to, pay for that to some degree. But I think it marks a change in his life. So that's what I mean. There's many other parts of the story. There's Melvin Suggs, who's a policeman who is married to the wrong woman, and because of her, he's gotten in trouble, and the police want to get rid of him. And Easy says, "Well, listen, if I can help you out of this trouble with the police, and you can get your position back, maybe you can help me with my problem." It's a very very complex and well, I like Easy in 1970.
Well, so Michael, I'm curious, how did this shift to the 70s change your approach to, preparation, to the narration in any way? I mean, I'm digging it because I'm here, but,
Yeah. You know what I've always loved, what I first loved about Easy Rawlins, the character, was how he reminded me of so many of the men in my family. My family's all from the South. I grew up in Chicago, but all my family's from Texas, Louisiana, those places. So his cadence, his way of phrasing things always struck home for me. And now in this book, since he's now in the 70s and he's older, and obviously this is the oldest that he's appeared, it felt most familiar to me, in fact, because it was easy for me to remember, my grandfather, my uncles, my great grandparents, all of the men on, both sides of my family were veterans. So I grew up with World War II veterans and Korean War veterans. My father and all my uncles all went to Vietnam. So, and then having sort of that same culture of being from the South, sitting out in the backyard, smoking cigarettes, barbecuing, whatever it was, just sort of those things that I remember and that I connect with in my childhood as men, just having fun with each other. And there's always that great dynamic between Easy and all of the characters, really. But for me, I focus on the men because obviously I'm a man. And I love how he, over the decades, has navigated his relationships with these characters, these very eccentric men, and I don't think those kinds of characters are seen often enough in Black literature, particularly in today's moment, because so much of it is, media related or whatever. So they're all, no matter, whether it's Mouse, whether it's, Easy, whether it's Fearless Jones, they're all very relatable to me and enjoyable.
Well, Walter, you have such great characters in your books, but I think people often think of the city of LA kind of as a character. And I'm curious, what about the 1970s LA did you want easy to encounter or be challenged by in this book?
Well, it's interesting. Michael and I were talking, before we started about when I wrote Blonde Faith, which is in the '60s, mid '60s, where uh, I had stopped writing easy for a few years, and I did because um, I couldn't think of another new story. I told all the stories that I wanted to tell, not that could be told, but then I realized one day that the reason that I couldn't do it is because so many of the earlier stories were based on the kind of people that you're talking about, Michael, like my family, my father, all of those people. And they were kind of telling the story through me. But
Mm,
now, when we get up to almost 1970, well, those are my stories.
wow.
So these are stories that I know. And so I did a switch
Mm,
with the book Little Green, and I kept moving from there, where all of a sudden the a lot of the information I get, and so you have, for instance, in Farewell Amethystine, is that in the first chapter, Mouse, who is the deadliest man in Los Angeles, is having an argument with Whisper, who Easy considers the best detective in Los Angeles, both black men, and they're arguing about the UC system
mm,
trying to fire Angela Davis because Angela Davis is a communist,
right.
and the argument, and that, to me, that introduces me so easily into the '70s.
Yeah.
Angela was, teaching there. She's doing her work. She's very serious.
Mm,
Mouse even understands the Frankfurt School, and he's gone to a whole new place. His girlfriend is not only from Vietnam, but she's a Viet Cong from
right.
Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
So this is where the '70s was, and to be able to write about it is just, a great deal of fun.
Yeah.
Did you have to research, and verify key details about LA in the 70s, or because it's more in your era, you knew everything?
Well, those people who are like listening and talking, and who will listen in the future, um, people often talk about research, and I do research most of it after I finish writing the book. And I said, I wonder if that's true. I wonder, did that really happen? I wonder how this would be, because I agree with you. Los Angeles is a character, but nobody knows Los Angeles.
Mm,
Los Angeles, I
Yeah.
mean, there might be a couple of city planners around who've actually looked at everything and studied everything and actually gone to every place and seen it. But most people don't. There are whole towns in Los Angeles you don't know what they are. And that's what's wonderful, though, is to create a feeling, which is the hardest thing, I think, of a place, so that people read it. And I always tell the story that one day I was doing a reading, quite a few years ago, and a guy said, "Yeah, listen, Mosley, you got that greenhouse, on Slauson that Mouse was staying in." He said, "Man, I was born in that house," and I went, "Oh, wow, great! I made up that
yeah.
house. That house doesn't
Oh my
exist."
gosh. Wow.
But that doesn't change the fact that he was born in that house. You know what I mean? Because we're
Hmm.
we're dealing with fiction, and we're creating a world that people. It's not that they know it technically, but they also have to feel it. And that becomes that's where character becomes so important.
So let's talk about, Michael, your stance on the character. You've got this amazing history recording many of these titles over time. So how is it to return over and over to this character? And have you changed the way you voiced it over all these years?
Hmm. I'm always happy. We were saying before we started here, I'm always happy when I get the call that there's a new Easy Rollins book, because I know that it's going to be a big jump in time, and you figure, oh, and so as an actor, you start thinking, well, how can I sort of embody that? This man is now, 60 years old, or um, so. What I think has happened for me is that certainly as I've aged, Easy has aged in the books, and it sort of naturally happens. There's a cadence that I'm very familiar with, again, from, the men in my family, that and a sort of a, I don't know how to, sort of a slow smokiness, but also I always think of it as a comforting voice, a voice that
Mm.
that it obviously is our, not only our protagonist but our storyteller. I mean, so I always aim for the voice to be soothing, because there's a lot of disturbing stuff that's about to happen, that the reader's about to experience, and yet, because of Easy's confidence as a character, he's got it well in hand. So I think that over the years, I've tried to embody that a little more with each and every book. There's definitely a voice that comes out of me naturally, I would say, and that voice has obviously grown more comfortable, as for me, as time has gone on. But what I also love about it is, I lived in LA. I've lived and worked in LA. I live in New York now, but I'm always in LA. I've been back and forth there between, 35 years. And I love, Walter, what you do is, to me, you capture LA better than any other, author that I can name. It's like Studs Terkel with Chicago, and whoever you might, want to claim for New York. And for me, I love all of those scenes. It's always, it's the restaurants and the sort of houses of ill repute that that you can smell the sausages in the restaurant. You know what I mean? In this is the speakeasies and the joints is like, oh my God, I know this place. So I completely understand why that man would say he was born in that house, because you conjure those places so well. And I'm also jealous, because as a writer myself, describing place is very difficult for me. I'm great with dialogue. I'm great with action. Place is hard. And Walter, you're a master of it. So it makes it very easy to sort of imagine yourself, Malibu. I mean, the house, Easy's house, which is one of the most amazingly described and yet concrete places I've ever read about. I know that house. I know the hill. I know the guys at the bottom of the hill, the Russian guys who go up. It's so, I always am amazed at your ability to render place in that way. And as I've always said, I'm sorry, Walter.
No, go on.
Well, I've always said, it's like Shakespeare. Great writing speaks itself if you just let it and stay out of the way and allow the images to come. If you're able to appreciate that, which I am, as you mentioned before. I mean, I'm a voracious reader. I've always been a reader. Reading is why I have an acting career. It's why I have a career in audiobooks, all of it, because I've always been absorbed by books.
There's all those different sections to writing. It's character development, it's plot, it's language in general, but also it's for me, it's always been who's telling the story. So, and it doesn't matter if it's first person or third person or universal. It doesn't really matter, because whatever, you have to go through these people who are going into the house, walking down the street, feeling it. You have some people in a lot of noir. People are just afraid of the streets. The people, people are after them. They have to watch. The car is going by. I don't. I have those people too. Of course, I have people like Jackson Blue. But I find my way into place by the characters. By following the character into that place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
that's,
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're great at it. You're you're great on all of those points. Plot, of course, and character development, and everything. But I just marvel at your ability to render a place so that you feel, as the reader, I'm there. I'm in it. I get it.
I'm curious, Michael, because you have to go back to some of these characters. How do you remember how you've done a character before, and how do you prepare for the returning characters?
I can't hear you. Hello?
Looks
Try it
like,
again.
yeah, Michael, looks like you've frozen.
Yeah, I lost you guys.
Oh
Are you
no.
back for us, or
We can hear you, but you can't hear us.
we'll give him a minute.
Hello.
I'll throw a question to Walter. Hopefully. Oh,
I
there's
can't hear
Michael.
you. You guys are frozen.
It looks like you came back briefly and then you're frozen again.
Hello?
We can hear you, but you can't hear us.
I'm frozen?
Yes.
How's that?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Can you hear us?
Okay. Well, I don't know what button to push.
Yeah.
No.
I hear you intermittently.
Okay, I'll ask the question slowly.
I wonder if could it be my Wi-Fi or?
It could be.
be.
That's
Yeah,
the challenge
I'm
with the
lost.
virtual world.
I'm-
We'll give Michael a second. Hopefully his connection
We'll
will
see.
return. But Walter, in the meantime, how do you balance, the personal details of Easy's life and his progression and the new case as you write? Do you think about that balance or planning those out, or is it just coming to you?
Well, you start writing, and my writing regimen is I wake up, and the first thing I do in the morning is I write, for about 3 hours. I write 1,000 words. The next day, I read the words I wrote yesterday, and then I make minor changes, and I write the new words. But over that period of time, over that 24-hour period, other things come up to me, and we have Michael back.
Yeah.
Other things come up to me, and so it's not like I know everything, and I don't think it's really good to know everything. I always think that a novel should be bigger than your head. If it's not, it's too small. So, but I'm always doing that. The question is, at what point does the thought process come in and say, well, this is happening and this should be happening? It might be 3 months after I've written that chapter that I come back and say, oh, this is what I was doing. You know what I'm saying? It's not a straightforward question to answer.
Yes. Michael,
Walter,
do we have you back?
This is a yeah, can you hear me? Am I
Yes,
here?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you
Yes.
hear us?
Oh, amazing. Technology. It works. Walter, I always wonder about when I ask other writers, there are, I think Stephen King mentioned something like a blank manuscript, or in this case, a blank screen, today is sort of like a giant piece of concrete. Like he sees it as this big block of concrete and he starts chipping away at it, and then it tells him what it wants to be. And then other writers sort of, notes, outlines, this is what happens, point A, point B, point C, point D. And for me, it's always been sort of a little bit of a combination of both. My watch is talking. A little combination of both, sort of, going by the seat of your pants, flying, and sort of slipping into that zone of where athletes go, where, actors go, when things are really, really, really working on kind of all burners. And how's that work for you?
Well, I think that, anybody who knows everything, my response to it is it's usually pretty boring to me. And that the thing that Stephen was talking about, the discovery, I think is makes lots of sense. And it depends on what the book is. It's like like who's your dance partner? That everything's going to be different. Certainly it's true in acting. Certainly it's true in sports. You have a boxer who's turned all the way around and still ducks somebody trying to hit him behind the head, because all of that stuff is in place, and then and works itself out. So it is a dance of sorts. And so I'm working on a book now, and if you asked me where I was, I wouldn't know. But I know that I'm getting further and further every time I sit down to it.
Is there one book that you think back on that was particularly challenging to write?
John Woman, the book I wrote, John Woman. It took me, I think, 17 years to write that book.
Wow.
Wow. Well,
And was
Couldn't get it. Couldn't get it. And then finally one day, I did the simple thing. I said, because I'd written the first half. Finally one day I said, okay, I will outline the second half, and it worked.
yeah.
I don't know if it was that day or if it was the outline. I really don't know.
No. It's such a crazy process.
Yeah.
So, we'll return to your characters, and I'll ask Michael that question again in a second. But I'm curious, Walter, are there any particular characters that you enjoy writing more than other characters?
I don't think so, because I love writing about every character. Mama Joe was a lot in this one.
Yeah.
Mama Joe and Fearless were a lot in this one, and I just had so much fun with them. I mean, Mama Joe is like, she's so smart. Like I can honestly kind of say she's smarter than I am, and and she says stuff, and she's courageous, and you just kind of go, wow, this is, this is a world that I know about from my family from southern Louisiana and Texas. And they have mastered something that I hope one day to master.
Nice. All right, Michael. So we'll hopefully get this question in. You return to these characters that obviously Walter enjoys writing. So how do you remember the way you voiced them in the past, and how do you prepare for that?
Well, it's interesting, and I don't have it down to an exact science, but usually there's someone who says, "Oh, well, this is what you did in the last book," and this is what, and the engineer will play that, and I go, "Oh, okay." But what's most important for me is remembering who I associated that character with in my real life. Oh, this mouse reminds me of my grandfather's best friend, whose name was Ulysses S. Grant.
Mm-hmm.
Black man in Chicago. And he in my mind is Mouse, and this, sort of a Cat Williams type in the same sense of his physicality, and he's small, very smart, very bright, and dangerous. So he's easy to remember. Easy's easy to remember. Fearless was easy because Fearless really got me on that veteran's moment of like, this is a big, brave, guy who runs through brick walls, and so for me, it's the process of kind of always trying to associate the character with someone that they remind me of in real life. And sometimes I get it, and then sometimes I listen, I go, oh, I was higher on that one, or I was lower on that one, but hopefully the essence, and well, the essence is so clear in the writing, so that part's taken care of.
So now, Walter, without giving too much away, or really anything away, is there one moment in this upcoming title that people are excited to read starting tomorrow that really surprised you as you discovered it?
Well, Easy was once in love with this woman named Anger Lee. He was 14, she was 17. They'd both been on their own for years in Fifth Ward, Houston. And how that relationship worked was, to me, like, it was really revelatory of Easy. Easy's he's the junior here. But she really, for that moment in time, loves him because, not because of what he does, but what he tries to do. And I think that for me was a great moment of understanding everything else that goes on with Easy for the rest of his life. And so I think that was a moment. I do love the Viet Cong girlfriend, though. I mean,
that section was because I even when I'm reading and when I'm actually recording, I usually read the night before just to sort of get a feeling for what
Mhm.
that section of the book without giving anything away to the folks who are listening. So much fun, so wild, and me going, this is insane. But yes, I get it. What? Okay, Viet Cong. Yeah, why? So good, and yet totally seeing how that fits into the LA of that time. It's. I feel like sometimes I don't know, Walter. You channel these things, but oof, they're so they're just so engaging and so different. And I was just thinking how I mean we've literally seen when you mentioned Anger Lee, and I don't think this was the character he lost his virginity to, but I mean we've seen the man lose his virginity in these books from to now being mature and still struggling with love and meeting the wrong woman and while looking for the right woman, something that everybody can relate to.
Yeah, women were really front and center in this particular piece. And I wondered, what was it in the writing of this that you had in your mind that brought women to such the center here?
Well, I think that women did. I mean, it's
Hmm.
an interesting thing. This starting in the 70s, women started saying, "No, no, no, we're
Yeah.
not doing this no more. No, no, I'm not going to wait, behind my desk until some man comes to pick me up and drive me home because he's, afraid to let me off on my own for whatever reason that is. I mean, I think this is Angela Davis time. I mean, she's doing it. And so it was just fun to have all of these other people and a whole group of people who were living, you know, with the exception of Easy and Mouse, they're living just a little bit in the past,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
and the women of the time are living just a little bit in the future. Saying, "You got me working this job to make money, so like that means we equal, right?" It like that.
Yeah. Wow.
So
And
Michael, I
Easy mentions that and has mentioned it throughout all the books as he's aged. You see him feeling almost like at least I've interpreted it that way. You know, he as he gets older, he's almost a man out of time. He's a
Mhm.
man out of his. He
Yeah.
still thinks about Mama Joe, which somebody in the chat just reminded me of. He thinks about Anger Lee, all of those folks, and how things were done back then.
Mhm.
How a black man in his particular station in life in the 40s and 50s would have been treated compared to today, and sometimes he has a hard time keeping up and realizing, and I appreciate this as well, it's a level of specificity that you just don't find in a lot of books where he has to remind himself, no, 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 I'm not in 1955, I'm in 1975, or I'm in
Mhm.
1965. And each of those decades are obviously different. And in each of those decades there were critical instances in the civil rights movement and
Mhm.
the and race relations that I was born in 1964, and I remember listening when I was a kid in the 70s to all, hearing about Angela Davis and hearing what, my grandparents and my aunts and uncles thought about her. And it wasn't monolithic. And that's the other thing that I love about Walter's writing. These characters who are black are not just this one monolithic group politically or socially. There's all walks of life, and it's nuanced in a way that I really appreciate because that's real life, and so yeah, I've always enjoyed the challenge of him trying to make him or trying to portray him, yes, as a man lost in time, and yet his sort of facility with life. He's smart. He's on his toes. He's a fighter. It keeps him fluid. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it's a great challenge.
And it's exciting to hear you talk about your interpretation of the text and your appreciation for the text, because I think that comes through so well
Mhm.
in your
Yeah.
narration.
Thank you.
I wonder, because you are reading it in advance, like how do you
Yeah.
keep the listener on the edge of their seat. Walter's discovering the words as he writes them. How do you discover the words as you perform them?
Well, to me, it's almost a similar muscle, because even though I will have read the night before, it's not ingrained in my mind. It's just sort of it helps the words flow a little bit easier. Maybe I work on them when I'm asleep. I don't know. But one of the first things you learn as a young actor is, to be in the moment, and at least to give the audience the impression that this is the first time this has ever happened. And I think narrating these books, I'm waiting to see what happens as well. It's like, what's he doing? What? Oh, we have to take a break. But now, wait, he's about to. So it's never canned. It's never rote. It's what is he going to do with this character now? How is this guy gonna, and yet manage to also be funny, socially conscious, obviously, and to have specific commentary on each of the time periods in which he appears. It's amazing.
That's why Walter's a grandmaster, right?
Yeah, that's it. Huh? I don't know. Because Michael says so.
Yeah, I did really appreciate in listening to this, how funny this particular book was. There were definite scenes where I was laughing out loud, and I'm walking the streets of LA, people looking at me, so I'm chuckling.
Yeah, it's there is a specificity in the many cultures. Of course, I said, Black people aren't monolithic, but there's the African American experience, there's the Afro Caribbean experience, the African experience, the European African experience, and so all of those things are part of the diaspora. And we all now, in this smaller world in which we live, encounter all of those versions of ourselves. And yet, for me, sorry, my watch keeps talking. I don't know if you guys can hear it. For me, there's nothing like capturing that familiarity of these people from this time, from this part of the world, who all come from, in their varied, representations, but the legacy of slavery. It's just, when people say, "Oh, that's in your wheelhouse," it's like, yeah, that's definitely in my wheelhouse. But it's also fun, to be able to, I'm an actor, to be able to branch out and try different, different things. Yeah. And I've read, of characters who are African and, all over the world, or from all over the world. But there's nothing like this feeling of just like, yeah, I know who these people are.
That's nice.
And so I said that to say, because the humor in it just pops out to me. Just the cadence, the rhythms of speech, the ups and the downs, the way men talk to each other, the way men talk to women, the way, men talk to kids, whatever. The humor is, for me, it's just it's part of the culture. And I try to bring it, obviously, to, whenever I'm narrating one of Walter's books. I'm turning off my watch. There we go.
It's very insistent, whatever it wants from you.
There's so much is talking to me now. My phone, my watch, my laptop. But anyway.
So now we'll give you a chance to talk to each other. I'll encourage people, if they have questions, to go ahead and put those in the question box. But now I will give Michael a chance to ask Walter a question, and Walter a chance to ask Michael a question. So Michael, let's start with you.
Okay, so Michele already asked you which character you prefer writing, and I understand, your answer. But my question would be, what just sort of tickles you? Who do you know when you sit down and start writing that? Do you ever find yourself laughing at your own work in that good, like, this guy cracked me up today and came out of my head,
Well, there are two characters who are like the the two sides of the coin, the heads and the tails. It's Mouse on one side and Jackson Blue on the other. Jackson Blue is he's just such a coward and such a genius, and he knows all of these things, that we get into a little bit in the book, just a little bit into math theory, and the new girl that Easy meets, and you just you understand, like when Easy is, he's interrogating the woman. He says, so how do you know? How'd you get to me? And he goes, well, first I met Jackson, and then I met his wife, and was that how you meet her? Oh, he said, oh, I know how you met her, because Jackson said you were working for him, and she could hear that little thing in his voice saying that he was interested. And he asked him to bring her to the house because, and she got mad. The woman gets mad, but he says, "I'm not saying you did anything. I'm just saying she knows him." And I think that when you really know somebody, and they do something that you would expect them to do, it's really it's really fun. And of course, and another level with Mouse. I mean, Mouse is he's the same level of brilliant, but it has all to do with people, and he's Easy realizes in the next decade between 1970 and 1980, Mouse is going to be a big problem for somebody because he's starting to become political, and that is scary. He's talking about the Frankfurt School. He doesn't know Herbert Marcuse's name, but he says, yeah, this guy Herb Marcus, man, he knows some serious shit, and that you got to go, and I love that. I love doing
that. What you said reminds me of one of the things I loved about Chicago in the 70s as a kid was, and it's, I'm sure this is not new to anyone, but it's the barbershop environment where you go in, and as a boy growing up, it's different now, but the big deal was when your father or your uncle, or in my case my grandfather, took me to the barbershop, and suddenly I'm surrounded by who I now remember as Easy and Mouse and Fearless, and all of these guys cussing each other out, laughing, talking about Nixon. I mean, we're talking about the 70s, you know what I mean? And then coming out of those environments as a kid, just sort of elevated, like, oh, I'm more of a man now. You know what I mean? Just from that masculine energy, which I think I just don't find enough of in fiction today. I think that there's an audience out there for, particularly among young boys. I was a boy who I loved to read. Walter, I was probably one of the first people who bought your science fiction novel, and the name escapes me at the moment. But there weren't a whole lot of other boys that I knew who were into it because that was nerdy, or that was geeky, or that was and as a result, I think that the voices that I miss, while they seem to be dwindling in the mainstream, I always know that when Walter, comes up with a new book, there it is. It's like going to August Wilson, to see an August Wilson play, and just like sitting back and closing my eyes and just thinking, wow, and seeing it and knowing it in the gut. Yeah.
All right, Walter, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, and it's a question.
Blue light. That was it. Yes.
Yeah, blue light. Yeah. I want to know, because I guess people know probably, but it's probably less known that you are a fiction writer, Michael, and so I want to know what you're working on right now.
That's very funny. I just sent off today. In fact, Don's going to do the forward for a collection of books of mine, a collection of stories of mine that have been published. I'm a science fiction, horror, crime guy. Officially untitled, working title is Midnight Miracle Massacres and Stories of Love and Corruption. I'm in the process of finishing up story notes. I was on the phone with the publisher today, sending those off. I just completed a third or fourth draft of a television series pilot that I'm hoping to sell in Los Angeles. The funny thing is, my career has been so strange with regard to, I've been an actor for so long. I discovered writing relatively, late, when I was in my, probably actually right before I started Spin City. I wrote my first novel. I had no idea what I was doing. And it took me 7 years, and it's still in my trunk somewhere in my house. But someone once said to me, well, why don't you create something for yourself? Why don't you make up a show or something? And those two things, even though I've always said reading was the basis of my career as an actor and as a writer, a love of reading, the two never just really crossed paths for me until relatively recently. So
yeah, that's great.
I'm working on.
I mean, it's interesting, that's so true, though, right? I mean, that you can only do, like, there are a lot of things that I love, like in film, that I love to go watch those films. I would never write that stuff. There are a lot of books that I like to read. I would never write those books, but I love them. They said, this is really great. 100 Years of Solitude, man. I've read it 7 times now. And but and I just well, this man is great. He's a great writer, and his story is wonderful. It's not my story, but his story is wonderful, and it teaches me. And listen, I haven't read your fiction, and I realized that, wow, you're writing this fiction. I have to read this stuff.
Yeah, I've had many things published, and 3 novels now at this point. Happily. And I think fiction for me was almost a release, or a sort of a side way of being creative. I mean, the story, I've written about it, and actually Don Cheadle features heavily in the story. I had a horrific household accident back in 1995. And it caused me to have to sit down and with my foot elevated in a cast for 12 weeks. That was the first time during those 12 weeks when I was getting job offers. That had never happened to me before. I always had to audition, but I'd been on China Beach. So by that time, people started to know who I was. And so all of a sudden, I can't work, and people are throwing gigs at me. Which was for me, it was like, okay, God, what am I supposed to learn from this? Well, Cheadle comes over one day. Now, Don and I met in the movie Hamburger Hill. So that's how we worked together in the Philippines for 4 months, and then came back and I moved to LA. And that's how we became friends. He comes over with a couple of friends and to my house to visit and, sort of shore up my spirits. And I'm sitting there on a couch, just sort of slumped, and my friends are working, and he was working, and my other, and he says to me, he must have seen something. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? I'm sitting on my ass. He said, "Well, you got to do something." And I said, I can't do anything. I'm an actor. I can't do anything. Very, defensive and angry, because I thought he was giving me crap. He says, "Well, have you ever wanted to, throw a pot or write a song or learn to play an instrument?" And he said something that stuck with me to this day. He said, "Creative people gotta be creative, or we'll go crazy." And I was pretty much going crazy at that point. So I thought, well, I always wanted to write a screenplay or maybe a short story or something. I hadn't written anything up to that point. This is 1995. So this was around the time laptops were becoming a thing, and people, were being able to carry these enormous, computers around. And I got one, and I started writing.
Mhm.
And not only did it distract me from the pain and the recovery that I had, because I was also going to have to do lots of physical therapy. It was an Achilles tendon tear, which what got me. So I knew I had this long road of recovery ahead of me. So I started writing. And at the end of it, I had two completed projects, one screenplay and one short story. I actually was able to sell the short story because the one thing that I actually enjoy, it's like I'm an actor who enjoys auditioning. And most of my actor friends go, oh, they hate it. I love it. By the same token, as a writer, I love revising. I love editing. I'll go in there and, because it's getting it right. It's the chipping away of the stone to, refine whatever that entity is going to be. So I actually submitted this short story to a zine at the time, and they bought it. So that, of course, was hugely, what? What? The screenplay just basically turned out to be the X-Men, which I didn't even recognize. It's like I read it like, that thing when you put something away for a month and then you come back and you go, oh, this is X-Men. Oh shit. Well, But then what I subsequently also came to learn is the process of selling a screenplay or a TV series or anything like that is so arcane and so that I put that writing aside for a while because, I got my kids are all grown now, but 4 kids, dogs, life, family, jobs, back and forth, LA, New York, boom, 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 boom. And I sort of gave up the whole screenwriting side because there just seemed to be this something that I wasn't. And honestly, I think we are now in such a better place with regard to race and representation on screen. I'd love to be starting now. But back then it was still, who's going to be Denzel Washington or Forrest Whitaker. And that was pretty much it, at that time.
Or O.J. Simpson. Yeah.
Well, on that note,
yes.
I'm going to take a couple of these audience questions. So, Walter, someone wants to know how involved in the selection process of the narrator for your books are you? Do you audition anyone? Do you listen?
I usually trust, this is the same thing. When I do film, I don't get involved in casting. I just don't, because other people know better than I what they're doing. I like things about people that don't at all fit with what the film is going to be, what the story is, and I don't know that stuff. So mostly I trust the people doing it. They send me, say, well, this is who we want and this is what they sound like, and I listen. I go, hey, it sounds great. And of course, somebody like Michael, I mean, if anybody asked me, I said, well, did you ask Michael Boatman? I mean, it's easy, I mean, that's an easy thing.
So some of the colors in the titles of some of your books, how do you make a decision what color to incorporate into those titles? Does it come to you at the beginning, middle, or the end of your process?
I don't know. It depends. Now, the ones that have colors, almost all of them are the Easy Rawlins novels, since because I wrote Devil in a Blue Dress, I read Death, White Butterfly, and I was about to write the next book, and my editor said, well, what's the color of this one? And I didn't really realize that, but yeah. And it doesn't, I might know the title before I start writing. I might not know it until after I finish writing the book.
Someone wants to know.
Wow, I always wanted to ask that question, Michele. And I just, what color? How does he, why this one? Why blue? Why red? Why? And of course, it's always grounded in the characters, but thank you for answering that.
Will there be more movies besides Man in the Basement based on your books?
Maybe. Movies are hard things. They cost so much money. My father once
Yeah.
said, Walter, writing a novel's easy. You just need a pencil and some paper. And, it doesn't cost that much, you want to make a movie. Devil in Blue just cost 35 million all the way back then when we made it.
Wow.
And so, if the money comes, that'll be great, and if not, it's a little easier to work in television, and television is becoming a little more intelligent. And so, but we'll see. We'll see.
Someone asks, what is the origin of the name? I'm guessing that might be Easy
What
Rollins'
name?
name. I'm not 100% sure. So Camille, if you're out there, let us know what name.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for either of you, in your creative process, what do you do when you're stuck? Sounds like Michael calls Don Cheadle.
Yeah. Well,
Good person call.
I will say that one of the things I've learned that works for me, and I have struggled with, I don't like to use this term. A lot of people are superstitious about it, but writer's block. I struggled with it after my second novel, which is called Who Wants to Be the Prince of Darkness. I think because that process, I had sold this idea to Angry Robot, this wonderful science fiction publisher. The first book was called Last God Standing. And they said, hey, have you got a sequel? And I was told or read from any number of how-to writers' books that I read when I was, flat on my ass. You always say, yes, sure, I got it. Yeah, I get it. Well, it took me, I don't even know, I can't even tell you how long I blew so many deadlines to get the sequel to Last God Standing out of me that I don't think I paid attention to the places that would have made it better. Last God Standing was an act of love, and it's that wonderful zone place where it's like I sat down. Okay, what do you want? What do you want today? And it came out. Who Wants to Be the Prince of Darkness sent me to hell, if you will, because I was writing for money, if that makes sense. We all do things for money, but it wasn't inspired in the way that, and I'm sorry for that, because while it got published and it didn't do very well, I would love to go back and revisit that. But the thing that did get me writing, finally, my long-winded answer to your question, Michele, I discovered one night when, and it is similar to what Cheadle said, but what am I going to do? How am I going to go? I don't know what this book is about. The first book was about God becoming a human being and trying to figure that out. Oh, okay, well, the devil will do it this time in that book. But it wasn't coming. It just wasn't coming. I got invited to an Elton John concert. Not only one of the greatest concert experiences in my life, this man, and this was 2014, something like that. He and his little 5-piece band that you've seen for all these years, playing alongside of him. And if anybody hasn't seen him recently, it's like Billy Joel, Stevie Wonder. Who are these? What? How can you be that talented, still be doing it, and still blowing people away? Well, that was Elton John for me. I came out of that concert. I have no idea why, but something in that performance and those words and that music, it ticked it all off. And so now when I get stuck, I'll turn on a piece of classical music, or I don't like to read a lot of things when I'm writing, just because that's like I wrote the whole X-Men movie and didn't realize it until, because things get, that sort of infected in my brain. But yeah, go to a museum, look at a beautiful painting, or I'm a fan of photography, not so much paintings, for instance. But any other mode of artistic expression can sort of give me a jump start, which is a good thing.
That is, yes. Walter, any
Yeah.
last words for us on what gets you unstuck, as it were?
Well, I did an introduction the other day for my friend who's a publisher and owner of Black Classic Press, Paul Coates. He was being given an award by the Writers Guild and Fiction Writers Guild. I mean the Prose Writers Guild, and so part of it I talked about that. So it's a paragraph, so I'll just read it. It's short. I used to answer, when somebody asked me about writer's block, I used to answer this question by explaining my processes of dealing with a work when the right words, the plot, or even the story evades me. Then one day I realized that the concept writer's block was far too unwieldy, accurate only in the description of an outcome, the cessation of the ability to tell your tale. There are so many possible answers for those who experience such an interruption. You could just push through like a husky against a blizzard. You might need a break or just to write something else for a while. Maybe you should do some research. Maybe you fear that your truth is anathema to the culture at large, or that your mother would hate the words you say. Or maybe when you were still pre-linguistic, you experienced a trauma so deep, very possibly unconscious, rears its head and your mind shuts down completely. Maybe your truth could get you killed, either psychically or physically. There's a thousand reasons for writer's block, and you have to deal with what is yours. So I can tell you how I did it, but that probably won't answer the question.
Right.
Well, that wraps it up all in a bow very nicely right there. So
from
thank
one
you.
who knows.
At the end of our time.
Exactly. So thank you both for joining us tonight, and for all of those of you in the audience. We are happy to be here with Murder by the Mic. Of course, thanks to Michael and to Walter for all of these great insights, and it was really fun hearing you guys talk before we got on screen, and to see your interaction and relationship. So I know the book comes out tomorrow, so look in the chat for a link on where to find it, to read it with your eyes, to read it with your ears. And as I say, I will sign off with thanks for listening, and have a great June is Audiobook Month.
Thank you, everyone.